Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. I am joined tonight with a couple of guys from Tochnyi, and they will explain who they are. And most of you will know, goodness me, I spend a lot of time in the morning referring to the work that they do, the work that Andrew Perpetua and his geolocating team do. So you know probably enough about them, but nonetheless, they can introduce themselves. Daniele, who I've had on live a number of times before to talk drones and drone stats, is going to join us once I think he's put his kids to bed or something along those lines. But I have Erlend at the moment that you might have heard on Andrew Perpetua's live streams and the Tochnyi ones, of course, as well. Thank you so much, Erlend, for joining us. Really appreciate that.
Thank you so much for having me and Daniele and you know, collaborating with the Tochnyi team and Andrew.
Yeah, it's such a fantastic team. I mean, you guys do a heck of a lot. It's really, really valuable. In fact, let's throw up some links here. So this is a Tochnyi website that people can check out. And if you guys, any of you guys want to help do geolocation, even if it's only sort of half an hour a day to do a few videos to help out, that would be insanely cool. And there's a link to join and help them do that. But basically the Tochnyi group, well, will you let us know what is Tochnyi?
Well, so you know, it's a group of people who met on the internet, but we all have a common goal of providing accurate information and analysis as much as we can, and also sort of a community where people learn from each other as well. So the people inside Tochnyi often exchange analysis and technical data or military knowledge, etc. So yeah, it's both, you know, what you see on the front end, but it's also a community that tries to learn from each other in a, you know, just so we can provide as much accurate information about the war in Ukraine as possible. We also try as much as we can to give Ukrainians voice for the world. It's not as easy as you think. It's, you know, they live the war every day. Talking about the war is probably not what everyone wants to do, but we have had some really, really good Ukrainian speakers and also some very valuable associates of Tochnyi as well, who help us with understanding Ukrainian law and Ukrainian society. So we're lucky to have a few Ukrainians that help us.
Yeah, and it's brilliant. Like the breadth and depth of knowledge you guys have, and some of you experts on the team is absolutely fantastic, with knowledge about certain weapon systems, so on and so forth. So yeah, that's really, really such an important resource, Tochnyi, and I would advise people to go and check out what you do. I know that you wanted Daniele to introduce the fundraising that you guys have been involved in, which ended with, or didn't end, I mean, part of the journey, I'm sure it's ongoing, it was with you ending up in Ukraine. Do you want to just talk us briefly through that? I know you'd want Daniele to say more, but talk us through that, because that will give us a vehicle to understanding what you have to say with regard to drones and how you come to know what you know.
Yeah, so you know, Daniele has been doing fundraisers for quite a long time. I think a couple of years by now, helping various people in Ukraine that needs supplies, funding, and over the course of a year, he got into contact with some volunteers who got, you know, some requests. They were often very small. He fundraised various different equipment, but then one of the teams that he was helping had a quite disastrous missile attack was this winter. So they lost, I think, 2 or 3 vehicles and a lot of equipment in an S-300 strike. So we immediately started to or Daniele immediately started to plan a fundraiser to replace some of that. So the most immediate need they had was car, SUV, and EcoFlow power banks, which are basically huge stationary accumulators or batteries that can provide 230 volt land power, and also quite a lot of amps, so you can power a lot of heavy equipment with it as well. They are very, very expensive, the ones that the unit needed, so we had to gather a lot of funds, and fortunately, so the thing is, I'm also part of a member of an NGO here in Norway that regularly drives down to Ukraine with equipment, and because of all the different challenges that you face when you have to export and then import a vehicle into Ukraine, I proposed to Daniele that I'll ask the NGO if we could fundraise on our own, and then the NGO help us with all the logistics. And my friend Peter, who is the head of the Fritt Ukraina, it's a Norwegian NGO, he immediately said yes, and we started the fundraiser, and he also helped us a lot out because we immediately, when we found the car that we wanted, he anticipated the money, or the NGO anticipated the money, and we secured that vehicle very quickly. We were very lucky to get that vehicle because it's a nice car. It was a Nissan Pathfinder.
And how much
big
do
SUV.
these vehicles cost for you guys to get, and then how much it costs to get all the way over?
Well, so that car was, I think, about 6,000 pounds, more or less. Not too much, considering that it had a replaced engine. The engine had only gone 50,000 kilometers.
Wow.
So pretty new engine. And the car was in pretty good condition, considering it was the 2007 model. So normally those cars are quite a lot more expensive, but since it had an engine replacement, value goes a little bit down. But we are also lucky to have some really knowledgeable people who work with cars every day that volunteer, so they check up all the different things of the car and replace what needs to be replaced before going down. But yeah, it costs, of course, some money to go down because you need to buy fuel, you take a ferry and all that. But in the end, like, we kind of volunteer some of the tickets and cost as well on the way. Like, we're there to help Ukraine. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you ended up driving down this vehicle down to Ukraine, and I presume into the west of Ukraine, to obviously your final destination. Was the vehicle packed up with other stuff?
Yeah. So we had the two EcoFlows as well that we bought, but the NGO also gets a lot of donations, like equipment. We got some, I think we had 8 boxes of equipment that was donated from people who accumulated various clothes and equipment from the Home Guard, which is our reserve army. And then we had a bunch of equipment donated from a tool company, like a hardware company, hardware store, and something from I think those, if you see those orange boards inside the high ice there, that's stretchers. I'm not sure exactly where they came from, but we also got some really, really nice boots. A lot of this is going down to Lviv because the NGO has a collaboration with a couple of Ukrainian NGOs in Lviv. And both, by the way, those are really, really high-powered Husqvarna circle saws, which you can cut through concrete, like reinforced concrete, steel, whatever.
Wow.
Yeah, those were donated by hardware store, and they're really expensive.
Yeah.
So we were fortunate to bring all that stuff down to Lviv. Some of it was just left there because it had other destination than our units and the units that we were delivering to specifically. But yeah, so when we were in Lviv, we had a total repacking of the cars and stuff. But yeah, but so we packed the cars completely full when we drove down. It was very heavy. You could feel it on
Yeah,
the road.
yeah, I bet. And what were your how were you met by Ukrainians? Were they another aid convoy? Were they thankful? Were they pleased to see you? Is it what they always see, or is aid? Do you have a sense that aid has dropped over the period of the war?
Um, well, certainly not from this NGO. This NGO is ramping up the deliveries quite
Really?
substantial. Yeah, I think every month there is at least once or twice a convoy. So this convoy was a little bit small. The week after, a convoy double the size went down.
That's
So
really good. That's quite heartening, actually.
yeah, the I think the NGO has delivered aid for more than $11 million right now. So it's
Wow.
quite a big operation at this point.
So you had struck up a relationship with a particular unit, and obviously, a lot of what you're going to tell us with regard to what you found out in Ukraine, specifically with regard to drones. Although you're coming to speak to us primarily about drones, there is an awful lot you can't say. Is that correct?
Yeah, so well, first of all, we went down with 4 cars. One was left in Lviv because that was his destination. It was a Toyota Hiace that they needed for logistics. And 3 cars went further. We drove from yeah, there you see them. Yeah, and yeah, so the other SUVs, we drove them first to Kyiv as a pit stop from Lviv. We're fortunate enough to spend the night in Kyiv, so we could walk around in the evening. It was very beautiful. Yeah, this is on the going into Kyiv, and you see immediately like all the fortifications that they built up during the first part of the war. It's very interesting and strange to see, like World War II style pillboxes, basically. And these
Yeah.
are the famous road signs that they cancelled out.
When I was in Ukraine, I remember being pointed out by Greg and Zhenya that there was a sign. I forget where we were, somewhere near like Kramatorsk, and there was a sign that was the wrong sign. So they purposefully put up like that this was somewhere else to confuse
Hmm.
the Russians, so that they're because the Russians at the time were using old maps, and there wasn't. I think they've probably been a lot more, they're a bit more updated now, but certainly at the beginning of the war when they were sent in with their APCs and the Rogsvardia, with their parade uniforms and everything, they had these old maps, and the idea was like, let's confuse the Russians so that they really don't know where they are. And so they literally changed some of the main town signs to the name of another town, and I wonder if it worked at all, but there you go. But
Yeah,
anyway,
it's quite an old tactic that has been done numerous times, but it kind of shows the depth of the involvement of society as well. I think
yeah,
when you go to those lengths, and yeah, this is the highway that goes into Kiev, or one of them, but it's a very massive highway and goes almost in a straight line for 50 kilometers. And you
yeah,
start seeing all those billboards, and I think they're very, very interesting
yeah.
because you see so many of the army and military
Yeah,
billboards.
that's what you show on these pictures. That so
Yeah,
many army billboards, either in kind of remembrance or like trying to drum up support or recruitment. Yeah,
yeah.
very much a military feel to a lot of these boards. And there you've got one to do with the Mavic drones. There, I don't know if that's trying to drum up some funding for Mavic drones. Who knows? But yeah,
I
so.
think it's recruitment for the drone school, actually.
Oh, right, interesting. Because
Yeah,
there are a number of drone schools that are operated sort of privately. Uh, the government has allowed a number of different places to train pilots. It's not like completely centralized, which I think is quite interesting. They've sort of almost got the private sector involved in drone drone training. But we have Daniele now here joining us as well. So Daniele, thank you for popping in.
Hello, good evening to everyone. I'm very happy to be here, and yeah, tonight will be a long night.
So we are with you, Erlend. You have made your way into Ukraine, and you are en route to deliver these vehicles full of stuff.
Yeah, and yeah, as I was saying, like we had fortunately some time in Kyiv as well, and we got to see this very very famous wall. I think it's outside in Saint Michael's Church, if I'm not wrong, where you have all this fallen all since Maidan, basically,
Right.
since 2014. And the wall is full. Like there's no more space on that wall for any more photos of fallen.
Wow.
And then outside there's also the burnt out Russian vehicles that are on display. Very famous. Yeah. So got to walk around there. I think there's a picture of a viewpoint as well somewhere from Kyiv. And I just was really stunned by that's the bridge, that's the pedestrian bridge. They call it the Klitschko Bridge.
Oh, he's done well for himself.
Yeah. But yeah, Kyiv is just there, and Kyiv is just such a beautiful city. I really enjoyed it. So much green. I actually enjoy the kind of Soviet style architecture. It's fascinating to me, and especially what they did with it, because they've tried to kind of adapt it and change it, and modernize it, making it look a little bit more appealing, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was lucky to see Kyiv before we got had to go to bed and get up early because we were driving basically to Dnipro, a little bit further, to deliver the cars to 3 different military units.
Interesting. So 3 different units you were delivering to. So Daniele, you were involved in obviously a lot of the fundraising. This was kind of your baby initially. Was this just a bridge too far for you to be able to go out with Erlend?
Oh yeah. Let's say this, that essentially was at the beginning I was planning to go, and that was a very nice idea because I could meet finally with Erlend after more than a year working together on Tochnyi. And also because this wasn't the first time that someone bring stuff that I fundraised for. I started in January 2023, if I remember well. No, 2023, yes. And I fundraised for a team of the GUR. And that was very tough because it was my first time fundraising. So this one was much easier also because I had much more followers, and also I knew how to move. I had the support of Oksana, who is a Ukrainian volunteer. She has another very large Ukrainian ONG who works directly with the soldiers. So I'm currently chatting with her because we are going to buy the 3rd or 4th EW system, and it's amazing how I could help from the comfort of my home, just managing people, knowing people, speak with people. And yes, that seeing those vehicles and knowing when Erlend told me mission accomplished, I was very, very much happy as I was there. Unfortunately, I wasn't able because also due to work constraint, I wasn't able to go anyway, unfortunately. But next time, I promise. There are lots of people that want to meet me, and I want to meet them. So
yeah,
including Erlend, of course.
Yeah, you've been working closely in I presume in your interactions out there. If either of you can turn up your microphones, I know that some people have asked that, but I don't know if that's at all possible.
Can you hear me better?
Possibly. I'm all right. I've just got headphones on. So, but
Okay.
so then you guys, so going back to Erlend, then you get down to deliver these vehicles and get to the units. How often do these guys get given stuff from other people? I mean, I guess there are so many units along the front line.
Well, so can you hear me better now? By the way,
Yep.
yeah. So the EW unit that me and Daniele mainly has been fundraising for. I don't think they've ever gotten any aid from abroad except from the fundraisers that Daniele has started, as far as I know, at least. Or at least it's not common. They mainly get the aid from inside Ukraine. So yeah, I think for them it was a new thing. We could also kind of experience it through the bureaucracy, which was not something they were used to, but we figured that out with good help from the Ukrainians that helped the NGO, etc. Yeah, we were very lucky to deliver to 2 other units as well, so I could meet them and learn more about their units. They probably get more often. They're bigger units than the EW unit. But yeah, I think it's very important to highlight these fundraisers that for units that aren't necessarily famous, because why certain units are famous abroad might be completely random. It doesn't necessarily have to do with the importance of their work. I guess Daniele can say more about that, but I
wonder if it's got a lot to do with how much they post on social media. So if you have a group that doesn't post so much, then they don't get traction with this kind of internet audience out there.
What I can...
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. One thing that I can say that I have, for luckily and unlikely, very much experience with that, because the GUR unit was was partially or mostly composed by Westerner who volunteered and who had most of them had prior experience, and they were essentially completely out from social media. They had a very strict regulation, because they were doing they were a forward observer, so they were doing at the time in Bakhmut, they were doing work for artillery, so they were trying to spot objective behind enemy lines. So their identity was very much removed from social media. They were forbidden to fundraise. So for me, it was very difficult to help them. But other units, like this unit that we helped, they had only help from local communities, because also in this particular case, this company, this unit works mostly on electronic warfare, and so they are essentially hunted down by the Russian, because they do a very particular job, not very much kinetic in the sense that we normally imagine, but they do an important job to deter, but also listen to the enemy.
The thing is, you're not going to see cool action videos from the EW people. Unfortunately, that they don't have much to show, and the stuff that they do are not necessarily things they can show either, because it's very sensitive for operational security to keep the sort of equipment and the details about them and the methods that they use and where they are. It needs to be concealed. So they basically aren't able to show their presence and what they do on social media, which again is going to result in less fundraising efforts for them, which is sad, but that's why it's very important, and I'm very happy to that Daniele started these fundraisers, and that we kind of found a way with the EW guys that we support, for them to communicate with the donors, and also make sure that operational security is preserved.
Yeah, because I was speaking to you the other day, Erlend, and you were saying, look, there's so much I can't tell the audience because of operational security and really interesting things that you've gleaned. And unfortunately, there's only a small fraction that we can share tonight, which is obviously frustrating for everyone that's like dying to hear as much data and information as possible. But that's just the nature of the beast, especially when you're talking to people about things as sensitive as electronic warfare. And it's interesting that you were helping people specifically concerned with that. What's the general flavor of how things are going in terms of the use of electronic warfare on the front lines that you can share?
Well, one thing I can share, which we can all observe, is also on social media, is that Ukraine is a very congested space in the signals field, and also very much jammed space. So there's a lot of jamming going on lots of different radio bands and frequencies from both sides. You have GPS jamming also, which is quite problematic and has been quite problematic for the Ukrainians. And there's a lot of things going on that we can't talk about. but yeah, there definitely are challenges. We can observe that as well from social media and articles and interviews done with Ukrainian officials. They need more resources and more educated personnel for sure in this field.
I guess there's going to be that challenge that we've seen a number of times actually with drones, with FPV drone units and IED drone units and what have you. Is there's this idea is like, do you have drone units embedded in every unit, or do you have a separate drone entity, or is it a mix of both? And I guess electronic warfare is exactly the same. As like, do you have a standalone electronic warfare expert kind of setup, but then everyone needs that along wherever you've got your own drones, you're going to need electronic warfare as well. I mean, it's just part and parcel of it. And so you have that tension between embedding it and being separate.
Sure, it's basically become a part of every setup, right? But I wouldn't say that the jammers that we see slapped on vehicles they're not always very sophisticated. Is my audio too loud again?
It's me. I'm the one that's too quiet by all accounts, but yeah.
Oh no.
That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't call. So, of course, a jammer is in the electronic warfare category, but most of the soldiers that use them, they don't necessarily have the background or training like the people that we've funded for. They do a completely different task than the typical unit that needs some sort of electronic warfare to jam for drones to protect their vehicle. And that's not a new thing in warfare at all. We've had radio jammers that soldiers have been equipped within their vehicles, that they were just told, turn this on when you are told to, and then turn it off when we tell you to turn it off. Because you can make setups that basically just work autonomously without soldiers needing much training on them. But on the other hand, electronic warfare is also a very complicated and difficult field to work in, and I think Ukraine, as they've done with drones, probably need to do a similar thing with electronic warfare.
Yeah. So what I don't know, whether you want to start with your experiences with electronic warfare, with drones. What can you tell us that you are happy to share with us? What were the most surprising things, maybe?
Meeting the soldiers, you mean, or what they told us?
Just with regard to the usage of drones and how they use them and who's got the advantage. Because one thing that I have noticed over the period of the war, I've been reporting every single day and looking at data, and then looking at what Daniele has been saying as well, and the Tochnyi crew, which is there appears to be a greater usage of drones by the Ukrainians, the data supporting that. And we hear sometimes battalion commanders, even through other contacts that I know, saying, oh, the Russians have got an advantage, but actually the data doesn't really support that. And so you get this sense that maybe, I wonder whether Ukrainian commanders know quite how many drones their own teams are sending up. A battalion commander, would they know how many drones are being used every day? Would they know the experience of the Russians with the Ukrainian drones? So they get the complaints from their Ukrainian soldiers that say, oh, we're getting hammered by drones, but they might not realize that actually they're giving the Russians even more drone attention than their own soldiers. So you get this tension between the data, the claims of how much each side are producing, and then the idea that the Russians often lie about that. My conclusion is I'm still fairly confident that the Ukrainians are both procuring, producing, and using drones more. Is that accurate?
I would say that's probably accurate, yes. From the conversations I've had and the observations I've made also together, mostly Daniele has done, but I've also participated a little bit in his work and followed it very closely. I don't have any doubt that Ukrainians are at least more proficient in their use of drones to quite a large extent compared to the Russians. At some point,
what do you mean by that?
They're just better at it. They make better drones, have better pilots, employ better strategies and tactics.
Interesting. So literally the whole of that, because Ukraine, to prevail in a war, Ukraine need to overcome a numerical advantage with precision or with asymmetries that are to their advantage, and they need to eke out every single advantage they can get. And if you're talking about drones and drones being such a central part of this war, then if they are having the advantage in every single spot along that journey, or every single variable that they can, if they can eke out an advantage there, then that can translate into, I guess, what Daniele looks at, which is lots more successes in terms of published video evidence of strikes.
Yeah, but I just want to add one thing before Daniele should speak a little bit about this. I think the Russian, at least at one point in time, used more drones than the Ukrainians, but they were not necessarily more successful. And one thing I also want to add is that the Russians are very successful in their employment of nice Nastratsura, by the way.
I did that for Daniele. I don't. They don't sell any. They don't sell any Norwegian beer down my local.
Well, pity. They're quite good beer here, actually. They have very, unfortunately, high success with ISR drones, so surveillance UAVs, and it's not necessarily because they're making really good drones. It's probably more because the Ukrainians don't have the ability to shoot them down, and that's problem with the air defense that we see every day in Ukraine.
Cool. Daniele, what would you have to add to that? So Erlend, if you could turn your audio down maybe a tiny bit, but yeah, Daniele.
Well, on this topic, I think we discussed for a lot of time about what the data tell us and how to understand the efficacy, but also the usage of the drone through observed data, because of course these are only the data that we are able to get from a public source, which is Telegram. Now it starts to become also present in YouTube and other channel of the units on both sides. And so there is always a kind of fog that you may or may not overcome, but through discussion with different manufacturer, and also by the same admission of the Russians on their own Telegram channel of the units, and discussion of some of their veterans, and also in some of their military blogger, it's evident that there is a kind of asymmetry between the two sides. Now, I don't think is a numerical, because I didn't present this data. I'm talking actively with Andrew to try to enable the data to speak also for what we don't see, but it's very difficult. And when we tried to integrate in the amount of data that we have, for example, an asymmetry on the number of drones that reach the target, which means every 10 drone that one side launch, how many will effectively reach the target, which doesn't mean that these will be effective and will destroy, but at least reach the target. Well, we know from verified sources that the Russian are between 10 and 15%. And the Ukrainian, at least at the time that we spoke with the Wild Hornets, they were, this was during one of our live, they were around 30%. So if you apply these to the stat that I've done, you will see that for a certain amount of time, Russian were way ahead in terms of numbers. So numbers of drones that they were launching. But only a fraction of these, a very tiny fraction, eventually arrive on the target, and only a smaller fraction will hit and destroy, damage, or incapacitate a target. They were very, very good at the beginning in striking defensive position for a simple reason. A bunker, a trench does not move. It's static, it's much easier to hit. Instead of a vehicle that does move or infantry that moves randomly is much more complicated. And I think another important point to understand, and we discussed this many times, is the fact that when you look at the data that we geolocate along the front line, you will see hotspot. But this hotspot doesn't always overlap between the two sides. So one side could be more active for the Russian side and another side for the Ukrainian. And if you speak with the respective commander, one will say, oh, in this location, the Russian are more active, and the other side, the Russian will say exactly the same of the Ukrainian. So you need always to be very, very careful when you ask gut feeling, unless you have concrete data about this. And yeah, that's my point. And of course, there is like drones that fail for other reason, which are not is not possible. I mean, not fail. Sorry, are not reported for many reasons. For example, for OPSEC, we know that some units do not post at all. So how you take them? But because they exist on both sides, you can say that more or less they balance each other.
So you mentioned the success rates. Erlend, can you talk at all? Is that a stat that you are able to give with regard to the success rate of drones? Because I've heard various numbers over time, going from the very low, surprisingly low, up to actually that's way better than I thought it was.
So first of all, I want to say that one of the units that we delivered to was the 47th Mech Brigade, and we delivered to one of their drone teams in a drone battalion. Actually, they have one attack drone battalion, and I think they have a recon battalion, which is almost exclusively operating drones. So they have two battalions, which are basically just drone operators, and
wow,
and everything around that.
What do you mean by battalion? How many people?
Ukrainian battalion seems to vary a lot, but as far as I understood, this was a fairly large unit, so around 400 people maybe. In the Ukrainian size, it's large because our Western battalions should have 600 to 800 people. Of course, a recon battalion and a drone battalion might be completely different from an infantry battalion, but I'm not exactly sure. But from the amount of companies they have, it seems like it's a fairly large battalion. They were night bombers. That was their job. So they operate very large drones and mine the roads with TM62 mines. We have some video of that, and we can watch it later as well. But they are very knowledgeable about drones, also because the one of the guys I got in contact with as well, and I still talk to him. He has done a lot of other drone tasks for the whole war. So he knows about FPV drones. He knows about spotting with artillery, or for artillery, etc. So I learned a lot from him, and I was allowed to speak briefly or generally about what he told me, but I can't say certain specifics. And the numbers of the accuracy is also something I can't say, but I can say that they have very good traction of the FPV drones that they use and their success rate. And they also have very good traction of the incoming FPV drones from the Russians, and they count every single one. And yeah, they know exactly how the war is going for them, and they're very happy about what's happening with the drone warfare.
That's really interesting, because that kind of intuition is actually really, really valuable. That gives you a proper, accurate insight, I would have thought, at least to those guys' experiences. If they are happy with the situation now, then actually that tells you an awful lot, because these are the people that are operating drones on a day-to-day basis and dealing with the enemy drones and so on and so forth. And I think that's a really good sign, personally. But yeah. So I have heard such varying, as I said, such varying stats. I mean, you've kind of hinted that the Ukrainians are better at using drones and have better drones. Are the success rates, do you think, I don't know if you know the stats for Russian success rates, but are you under the opinion that Ukraine has better success rates than Russia?
Yes, I do. But I don't want to diminish the threat that the Russian drone the weapon that it is. Like, it's really, really terrible. A lot of people die to Russian drones as well, and the Ukrainians are emphasizing that too, that they need better drone defense.
Was 90% of injuries in hospitals are now drone related rather than artillery related, and that is massive.
Yeah, that's crazy, because for a long time artillery was the main cause of fatality and injury on both sides, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so the one thing I also want to emphasize is that I'm not very happy about the drone warfare's development, because as a former soldier, it terrifies me. And meeting these people who put their life on the risk every night, going out there in the darkness, and they know that if the Russians have a drone with thermal sensors, they are very easily discovered. That really did, burn in to me, as every time I talk to these people now, like, I wonder, if they are okay. Don't want to ask too much about it, because they probably get that question all the time. But this war is showing something new, that we don't really know how to deal with it. And I'm not so happy personally about the development, but I'm happy if the Ukrainians get the edge on the Russians, of course.
I've talked previously about the psychological effect of the sound of drones. About, you hear these stories of people say, I've heard Russians in the Zaporizhia line saying, I'm afraid to come out of my dugout. We can only come out at night. We can't really get out and have a breather because there are just drones bloody everywhere. And you think that must have such a psychological effect on people, and just the sound of drones. And I guess if you're at night as well, it's even more difficult to find out where a drone is. If you can hear a drone, then you're just thinking, I'm done for. It must be such a horrible psychological impact that these things can have on you.
Yeah, and that's also why it's very important that they communicate with each other when they're launching drones as well, because of course it will impact their operations if they don't know that drones are going to fly over them. And they definitely do plan this, and they have a whole orchestrated basically flight control, as far as I understood.
That's incredibly important, and I've thought about this a number of times during the war, whereby who knows, and this goes back to the like larger drones as well, that you are sending a reconnaissance drone over, but if you're just a soldier seeing a reconnaissance drone and you're thinking, is that one of ours, one of theirs, how do I know? As a random guy, do I shoot it? And the same for drones on that smaller level, localized level. You know, is that ours? What is that? Now I'm scared and I'm supposed to be doing a mission, but now I'm going to hide, but actually it was one of my own drones. That's a really important aspect. So you're saying that there is genuinely good, or at least in the groups that you were with, genuinely good communication, and that's an important aspect.
Yeah, but I also want to emphasize that this has become one of the most professional battalions in the Ukrainian, or brigades in the Ukrainian army. So I'm not sure if that's the case for all the different brigades. That's also probably why you've heard so varying stats, because I'm almost certain that the Ukrainian Central Command won't give out the stats for the overall drone warfare. I would doubt they did. I think most of the stats that we've heard from the Ukrainian sides are probably from different areas of operations or different brigades, and that would also explain why they vary so much in the stats.
You will explain, or that does explain it.
That would explain.
Yeah. Just talking about thermal drones, Daniele, you have, when I've spoken to you, you've seen an improvement from a Ukrainian point of view as to the number of nighttime drones, thermal and nighttime imagery drones that the Ukrainians have been using. Is that still something you're seeing in the statistics? Have the Ukrainians kept ahead? What they were behind? Are they now ahead of the Russians and keeping there? You're on mute, by the way, Daniele, if you are speaking. Oh, well, I think he's just done a runner. Erlend, is that then something you can speak to at all?
Well, one thing I definitely have understood is that they're very good at employing cost-efficient thermal and low light sensors, so like NVG sensors, basically, on their drones, so that they won't waste very expensive thermal optics when they don't need that. We've seen that. We also did an interview with some of the guys behind the Wild Hornets, and they showed some stuff like we're using these kind of very cheap NVG kind of sensors because we actually don't need anything more advanced for this task. But other times they do acquire more expensive sensors for the when that is needed. But yeah, I think they're very good at the economics of that.
Yeah, so this is one of Daniela's analyses. This is going back to March, though. I wonder whether this is something he's still seeing. Daniela, can you hear me at all?
Yes, sorry, I had a connection issue. I don't know what happened.
No
but
problem.
I was able to understand that you were going to ask me about the night vision.
Yeah, so
drones.
we've seen over the period of your analysis here that the Russians had a massive advantage in terms of night vision FPV strikes on the Ukrainians, and then the Ukrainians overtook in March, and it looks like a massive concerted effort has taken place here, and also a downtick in the Russian use of nighttime drones. So is that something that's still taking place as far as you understand it?
So I do not have published at the moment these stats, but from the data that we have, we can say that the situation pretty much stayed very similar to what we have seen essentially in March. So that there was like an increasing usage on both sides, but with always a kind of an edge on the Ukrainian side, But honestly, I think that both sides are doing very, very similarly well on this. So somehow looks like, at least for what we see published now, night vision drone strikes are sometimes are very much attacks on particular element, like very high value target, but also sometimes even infantry. So it's very difficult to understand if there is like a kind of bias, in the sense that these may be more affected by OPSEC, so they are less released. But from, at least from what I can see from the data that we analyze from Andrew that work, more or less they are similar. There was a period where Ukrainian have done much better, which was in April. But after that, more or less the situation has been stabilized, more or less with the Russian a bit below the Ukrainians. But I think they are using this type of drone equally. There is no big difference between the two sides.
And do either of you know, because as general consensus here says, Ukraine is producing and delivering 3,000 FPV drones per day. So that's what they're claiming. And it appears that that's, I would say, is probably reliable. They're also delivering other heavier bomber drones and recon drones. And Europe has promised to donate 1 million drones this year. So there are these drone coalitions led by Latvia and the UK, with other countries involved as well. Have you noticed, do you have any information, possibly Erlend from his experience out there, any information about other drones being procured from outside, or are they different types of drones that maybe other countries provide, maybe not the FPV drones that are cheaper to manufacture?
Well, from what I understand and the conversations I had, the overall majority of drones are being procured from Ukraine, and then there are some companies, like there's one small company in Germany providing a very small number of FPV drone that they developed. Then we have quite a lot of surveillance drones being provided by European countries, and then obviously like the Banshee has been delivered from the UK. I'm not sure if that's in the same kind of topic what we're talking about as a long range drone that has been basically re-engineered as a small cruise missile almost. But yeah, the most of the FPV drones, almost all of them, and also most of the heavy bomber type octo or hexacopter drones are being produced in Ukraine. And then of course you also have a lot of commercial type drones that are being used. The Mavics and Autels are kind of the two big brands.
Yeah, COTS drones, commercial off-the-shelf drones. You mentioned, Erlend, that, and I have a feeling this is an area that you won't be able to talk about, but maybe there's something you can say in terms of generalities. But you talked about the advantage that the Ukrainians have in the way they use drones and the tactics that are used. Like when we watch drone footage, we only ever see like the terminal phase of the drone as it smashes into some bit of kit, and we go, well, that's brilliant, that's easy, it's just like flying, it's just like playing a computer game. But obviously it's a lot more involved than that. Can you speak about the generalities of what you learned about tactics? I know that you were kind of blown away that it was more, there's a lot more to it than one might think.
Yeah, so going there, I kind of knew that if I was able to obtain some information about this, I would probably understand that there are more things to what we're seeing than what they show us. And that probably what they show is kind of either a story they want to tell, or just plain success over and over again, and destruction, or all the stuff that we see on Telegram videos. But yeah, the complexity of the operations, how they are planned and how they're carried out, is definitely very well organized and orchestrated. Yeah, it's a whole new warfare set of tactics that needs to be studied in great detail, in my opinion. and the Ukrainians are, paving the way for the new sort of warfare that we have to adapt to. And we should, as Westerners, we should demand that our own militaries study this in great detail and learn from the Ukrainians. And I think the best way we can do that is to supply them with drones, ask them if we can get some of their data and some of their knowledge, and so that we can continue to supply them and continue to train more Ukrainians.
Yeah, this is something I've talked about an awful lot, that we help out Ukraine, not primarily as a moral obligation, right? So we in the West, whether it be the US, Norway, UK, Italy, right? We're not sending our stuff out there because, hey, let's just be really nice, let's have a charity Sunday. We are helping Ukraine because it's in our best interest, it's in our strategic interest, but also when we're providing aid to Ukraine, yes, we are military equipment, we are upgrading our own armies with a presidential drawdown that you see in the US. They're giving their old stuff to Ukraine and then getting newer stuff themselves. So it's a way of just funding their own, expediting their own improvements. But also, when we are helping with things like these coalitions, this is a two-way street. So we are providing R&D and new stuff that we are developing ourselves. For example, the UK with the Dragonfire laser, we're doing that, getting that to Ukraine, but we're getting all this information back that improves our understanding of how this will operate. You're testing it in a perfect test bed, and then you're improving your own equipment, therefore, and your own knowledge base for your own national security. So this is in the best interest of all of our nations to come and help Ukraine. Were you aware of any kind of information going back to other nations at all?
Well, one impression that I got from some conversations that I had is that if Western nations are willing to contribute to specifically the drone warfare effort with either both money and technology, or just one of them, then the Ukrainians are willing to share some of the knowledge on that field. And I think that's a massive leverage that Ukraine has over Western countries that are helping Ukraine. And to be frank, I'm very angry with my government for them not, pitching in money for the Ukrainian industry, especially because Norway started off giving a lot of aid to Ukraine compared to other nations, and now we haven't really increased the aid a lot, and also we're not investing money in Ukrainian industry, and especially in the drone industry that Ukraine has blooming now. There are great opportunities for both our own companies, so defense industry companies, and also for our own knowledge that we need to obtain as fast as possible, because let's say that in 2 or 3 years we're going to be involved with some sort of armed conflict either in Europe or somewhere else. We are going to face this challenge, and right now we have no idea what we're up against. Absolutely no. And I think we have a lot to learn from the Ukrainians, and we also have a lot we can contribute with, because we do have certain sets of technologies that could be adapted to work, alongside or especially defend against Russian drones. So yeah.
Well, actually, we'll come on to some. There's been a bunch of electronic warfare questions, but for you, Daniele, have any universities, research centers, intelligence organizations contacted you for your data and research? I know that Commission, top-notch guy, as I always say, the strategic industries minister has taken your data and has reposted it, and I presume therefore kind of used it at least to some level. Have you had any interest in the work you guys are doing?
Well, I think that I'm not sure if he directly took our data immediately, but I think Top Lead, which probably is connected to his office, reposted and refabricated the stats in order to present these to a general public. I don't remember if it was in Ukrainian or in English, but I think was at the time was in support of the initiative that it was going to bloom in that period, because it was between January and February, I think, something like that. It was in the period immediately after December where we observed that, yeah, because the first time we speak about this was in March, I think, with you, Jonathan. So I think it was around that period. So I think it was very useful for them and for the minister to essentially present to the public the importance of FPV drones and drones in general, because even when we see all those stats, all those stack of red vehicle and stuff destroyed on Andrew's data, it's always, you can't, sometimes they are mixed. So you say, oh, it's a lot of stuff, but it's very difficult then to deep dive in all what happened. So essentially, my role at the beginning was just to put like a light on that stat and say, look at this is what's going on, because it's relevant. Because in the end, at the very, very beginning, my contribution was just to take the data and plot in a way that was evident. And only after I start to do more active analysis on the data, which led then to my not frequent, but essentially once a month, I try to write something about FPV, but I use the data to do an analysis, of course. And in terms of other research center, I don't think so. But I mean, there some analysts and some people from US and also from Europe contact me. We had some chat, some discussion, let's say. It's been very interesting, and I think one of the I don't shy about this because I'm doing this mainly for this reason, because I think that if we don't allow the politicians, which are in the end those that need to put the money and put the framework of laws in order to facilitate this type of industry to flourish, we will be in trouble when the next war will knock to our door, because we are prepared. And you can see this immediately on how we are proposing loitering munition for Western army. Is always like sometimes it's very discouraging, because it looks like sometimes we are not looking at this war. We are still in Afghanistan. We are still thinking that we are not in a large scale combat operation where attrition leads the way. And so we have this very expensive and very small amount of equipment that has been demonstrated to be very useful, but also very problematic when you need a huge amount of them.
Yeah, it's about scaling these things up, making economies of scale, making them cheaper, and using them just as much
cheaper,
as
but not bad quality. So I know that at the moment, and also taking this into account, I try to repeat this to everyone. The drone that, for example, Wild Order, which are beautiful machine, and also the way on how they work is more close to an industry rather than a volunteering group. And I say this many times. These guys are doing industrial quality job.
By the way, I should be interviewing one of the lead guy from Wild Hornets that you're talking about, but it just hasn't panned out yet. But yeah, carry on.
No. My point is that they are able to offer this drone at very, very cheap cost, because they are essentially doing this for free. This is a volunteer organization. There is no stipend, or at least from what I know, very little stipend paid to them. This is a war effort. So this is also, I don't expect the future drone to cost that less, but of course, I don't think a suicide drone should cost $100,000.
Yeah, Speaking of nocturnal, nighttime drones, does thermal imaging disguise? Do those disguise suits? Are they working out? And Stephen Bendel. And by the way, Stephen, I sent you an email because I know you've just been to Ukraine to see if you're up for it. So I don't have my email once you're junk. But anyway, question to Erlend: would it be useful to provide some sort of heat blocking blankets to the Ukrainian operators to avoid detection from thermal drones? I mean, do we know how useful these are? I've seen one piece of video the other day of a Russian hiding under a blanket, but you could see his like shins and shit boots and whatnot, and then the FPV drones just went and hammered him there. So it's like, yeah, it worked, but not perfectly.
Yeah, that's been a tactic to avoid detection from thermal imaging for quite, a few decades at least, and definitely that's useful. It's being used, maybe not always successful. What is very useful is thermal, so multispectrum camo nets. They are very expensive and often very difficult to obtain because they are they have restriction on export often, but they are those are very useful, especially for vehicles. The Swedish they gave
is that what the Swedish have on their Stridsvagn and CV90?
Yes. Yeah. So on the Stridsvagn 122 and on the CV90 they have something called Sub Barracuda multispectrum camo nets, and I know for a fact that when the Russians captured a CV90, there's some Swedes who were more angry and in despair that the fact that the Russians obtained. There you actually see it on the left side. There, yeah. No, up, one up. There, yeah. That the Russians obtained the camo net, which is kind of funny. Yeah.
Interesting. So, right, are you guys okay to answer some questions on electronic warfare? There's quite a lot. SK says EW would have been provided by partners, but Europe is so extremely slow. Why is it? So I've heard that this is basically the cutting edge of warfare, and that is why people are so reticent to give their EW technology. Like America's got some amazing stuff, but they are not strictly not giving it to Ukraine. Is that because it's just basically it's the one area where there are these technological advantages? Erlend, Daniele, anyone?
If Erlend would like, I can. Right. No, I don't know if Erlend is busy or cannot answer, but I think he has some technical issue. Otherwise, he would tell I cannot answer.
Yeah.
But I think there are a couple of problems in terms of. First of all, the scale. As I told at the beginning, this type of the presence of drone along the entire front line is so extended that is very difficult to have enough kit for the entire front line. The second problem is that most of these sensors have a precise end of life because these components have to work in order to protect a wide area, have to transmit at high level of power, and these transmitters, even if you turn them on and off, they will have a definite amount of life. And then of course they can be, once you turn on, they can be also detected, so they can be destroyed. So Europe, and they are very complex system, also sensitive, so having one of these captured today would be a major blow for NATO. So since the start of the war, if you notice, NATO tried to send good equipment, not stuff that would not be useful, but at least from mid 2000, even the Bradley, which is super effective, is the version after the Operation Desert Storm, the ODS version. The Marder are going to be upgraded even a bit more, but still 90s, early 2000 upgrade model. So there is some refrain on these from NATO because these are particular type of equipment where NATO has an edge on Russia and also on China. The problem is China, it's not Russia. So I think NATO is very reluctant to put at risk these type of machines. And the other problem, as I said, is that they are not going to be able to cover all the front lines. So and also we are not probably at the moment able to produce so many. So it's like a cost benefit and risk that doesn't match, essentially. Instead, Ukraine is developing its own systems, which can be effective. I'm currently funding them, and can help to add a layer of protection to the soldier, because you cannot think to solve one problem like so eradicated like drones with just one solution. It cannot be only kinetic, it cannot be only electronic warfare. It needs to be a set of possible solutions that together in a collaborative way not completely eradicate the problem, because it's not possible, it's too diffused, but tends to minimize the risk for the troops on the ground. And this also pass through a different type of strategy. With the time, you will start to listen from analysts about the footprint of a battalion or a military unit, because when soldiers were in Afghanistan, because they were fighting against Taliban, they have no problem in using radio or using all their electronic device. But nowadays, also been quite hot in the sense using a lot of armored vehicle and
mechanized equipment and stuff, and
exactly.
stuff that's going
These
to
produce noise, heat. So all these things produce signals that can be captured by reconnaissance vehicles. So
and Russia have always been pretty ahead of the game with electronic warfare, or at least that was a received wisdom, that they've been pretty good.
That's of course something that is possibly true in the old style war, because I don't think they are as good as Ukraine in terms of FPV drone. But it's not because the technology is super complex. It's just because it's so pervasive and so diffused that you can't be present everywhere at the same time with maximum efficiency.
This is the chaos of war, right? Because you've got all of these units on both sides throwing out all of these drones, like one after the other, into the air. So FPV drones, IED dropping drones, hexacopters, octocopters. Then you're going to have your reconnaissance drones to make sure that they're spotting for targets and acquiring those targets. And so you've got, short range reconnaissance drones, and you've got long range, the skies must be full of this stuff. And then you've got electronic warfare on both sides. But then if you're too good at electronic warfare, then you send down your own stuff. And so it must be just an absolute nightmare to try and affect a significant change just for your troops.
Yeah, totally. And if you read and if you look at the doctrine that was developing about the multi-domain doctrine, this is just an expansion of that. Because if you think now there is a catch in this. Most of these FPV drones do not communicate each other, so they are not sharing information, and possibly most of the reconnaissance drones don't do this. But once these drones start to communicate and exchange information, that's the real nightmare start. Because all our equipment, like from modern battle tank, IFV, MRAP, helicopter, F-35, and so on, are all designed to share information. So we needed to take into account that in the future, it will be more difficult to hide yourself and to surprise your opponent because of the number of sensors that are available and the number of information. The real problem will be process this information, because it will be so much that humanly it's very difficult. And we already see some armies using artificial intelligence to decode all this information.
It's interesting here. Wizard of Ooze says electronic warfare, like any electromagnetic signal, drops off by a factor of distance squared. The only way to extend it is to increase power output, but 2 times distance requires 4 times power. So components will overload and die. I mean, this obviously requires just huge amounts of power, which is challenging enough as it is on a battlefield. And it means that, as with anything that becomes more powerful, and you're giving a greater footprint and you become a greater target. So there's obviously a trade-off there that takes place. Just there's so many electronic warfare questions here. So you're saying that the Ukrainians are indeed creating their own electronic warfare equipment, so that's good. Somebody asked question: has Ukraine got electronic warfare specific trucks? Are they delivered? Are they in use? I mean, what does electronic warfare literally look like? What does it physically look like? Electronic warfare
Looks like a big lightning. No, it could look like your TV antenna, or it could look like the video transmitter on an FPV drone, or it could be a vast installation on the top of a hill. It's such a big field of it's very difficult to describe, and I think EW as a field is probably becoming too big of an umbrella, and we probably need to start utilizing different specific terms when we want to talk about, for instance, drones. We talk about drone specific jammers, right? And most of them are very, very simple devices, and I saw a good comment about the fact that they burn out a lot, and that's something I've seen a lot being complained about, both on the Russian side and also on the Ukrainian side. They burn up because these antennas that they are being manufactured with, and probably also some of the other components, transistors, they're not made to output, let's say, 50 watts, 100 watts over time. They're probably only made to transmit in short intervals, because they're using components that they buy off shelf in the consumer markets to create jammers, and they might be effective, but for in a short while, but then they need to change out components, maintain them, etc. And that's also I personally a little bit skeptical when I've seen people doing fundraisers for couple of $100 for an EW device that is supposedly going to protect and give an umbrella to a single soldier or a truck. I find it really difficult to believe that this is an effective.
I've seen both a Russian and a Ukrainian, two different soldiers with backpacks on, with all these antennas coming out, and these are like prototype individual like EW jammers for their own unit. Like they cover like a fair amount of land, but it looked pretty heavy, and because you need these big power packs to be able to operate them. I mean,
probably the fertility rate of the soldiers that are using these things is going to drop quite a lot, and it's not. It's really not good. Like
really,
it's not good.
Interesting. Yeah, because there was talk about this at earlier on in the war when Ukraine started hitting Moscow with a couple of drones. If you remember back, sort of, I don't know, was it a year and a half ago? And then loads of the Moscow police started getting these drone guns, but then they were complaining that actually they had a feeling it was doing more damage to their testicles than it was to anything else. So that was interesting. But Aussie Bugger here says, how would a jammer be detected and located? Like, how do they work? How do they minimize detection and minimize themselves from becoming targets?
So any radio transmitter or something that emits radio signals can be triangulated, and That's very
So
old
a
technology.
bit like counter battery fire, in the same way that you can triangulate. Like, it was sent from there, it's going in this parabolic curve. It's going to hit there, so we know where it's sent from, and therefore we can blow up the artillery piece. So you can tell from the radio wave where it kind of sort of where it's going, where it came from, and therefore.
Yeah.
Then,
like radio triangulation is something that's been around for 100 years. The Germans were very good at it. That's how they often located partisan cells and kill a lot of partisans that way. And
right.
They were driving around in trucks that were locating them. So, I mean, there are different ways. But generally, the idea is that you set up a set of antennas with a fixed distance in between them, and then you can measure and actually find roughly exactly where it's being transmitted from. So, being an operator that utilizes a lot of EW on the front line is also very dangerous, because you're going to show up as a beacon for the enemy signal intelligence guys.
Yeah, and so that's the detection. How does jamming work? I mean, there's a frequency of radio waves. Do you just mess around? Do you just send out radio waves that kind of messes with that radio wave getting from A to B? I mean, I'm a very unintelligent person with regard to this kind of stuff.
You basically create noise on the channel, and if you have a higher output radio wave, so let's say that you have a transmitter that is stronger and also maybe is closer to the targets that you want to jam, then you're going to block out the signal that they need to receive, basically, or transmit. Yeah, so you mess up the signals by transmitting on the same radio waves.
Yeah. I mean, is this opinion correct? So not the one that's up there, this one. Finnish guy says, I've read so many different Russian Telegram threads that Russia either doesn't have electronic warfare at all, or has too much of it, and it messes up its own weapons systems. Is this true? I mean, which of that, if any, or is it partly true? Depends where you are.
I have part of the answer. I think these come from the fact that there are some groups that are essentially armed in a better way because they have more connection. So it's not a tribal things, but the equipment, and this happen also in Ukrainian army. Not everyone get the same amount and the same type of weapon. Mostly not because there are friends, but just because there is so much need that essentially the good stuff goes immediately to those brigades that are mostly on the offensive, or in particular critical region, and the rest takes whatever is left. But I saw a lot of people complaining, for example, with Sutoplatov, which is a very big organization very close to Putin, who had essentially took most of the money for FPV drone production, but also for deterrence, so essentially electronic warfare. And so only few units have access to this very good quality stuff, and the rest is left with whatever is available. And the part that they say that it interfered with their own kit, this is probably due to lack of training, because as Erlend told you, when you do electronic warfare, is essentially you are talking with Erlend, and I try to shout over you two communicating. So I'm posing my voice, and you cannot understand what Erlend is telling you. So the point is that you do these at different frequencies. Like if you do to another frequency, and you are, for example, you are using 100 hertz. I'm take this number as random. I am doing jamming on 100 hertz, but I'm not doing only 100 hertz. I have like a range, so plus minus 50. If you are transmitting your own stuff in that region, you are jamming yourself. So if there is no communication, or there is lack of communication or poor training, which is often possible because most of these kits that should counter drone are not the electronic warfare systems that even NATO would have deployed. Is a stuff that came because of the need. So there is not much training, there is not much experience, and also the people that use probably were mobilized or do not have the proper training. So it's very likely that they, in order to protect themselves, they jam their own communication or their own equipment.
Yeah.
One thing that I wanted to add to the whole triangulation thing is that I guess you have seen Andrew Perpetua's. I think it's it's a perpetua stream of tweets, because he is making this this quote tweet unquote tweet thread of air versus or air to air combat with drones, and there's a lot more of this now, and I think it's. Before he would post every single one he found. I think now it's not possible anymore because it's happening so often. That tells me that both the Russians and the Ukrainians figured out that utilizing triangulation to find enemy drones is probably a good idea.
Right, so you're saying that that is evidence, because I was going to say it might get to the stage where drones are so pervasive that you can't triangulate because there's too much out there. It's like
you can, you can, because you cannot fly or let's say you fly 15 drones in an area. You cannot fly them on the same channel. Yeah. So you tune your triangulation SIGINT to the certain channels that you want to look for, and if you see 15 drones are operating that are probably enemy, they could probably individuate and locate them quite quickly if they're good operators.
Interesting. These are whole areas of skills that I didn't know existed. Talking about sort of a change of behavior, I showed a video of a train being hit this morning by a drone that went to 30 kilometers. And I said, this tells us two things. First of all, that FPV drones are extending their range. This is really significant, because if you can start getting behind the contact kind of zone to rear logistics with FPV drones, you can cause merry havoc. So surely, I presume everyone's working really hard to make sure drones have longer and longer ranges, and also hitting railway logistics, I mean, is interesting, but then you would need probably a bit heavier, heavier payload in order to be able to do that. What have you been noticing? Longer and longer ranges?
I guess we both have seen. Andrew has also geolocated some insane long range FPV drone strikes. Really? Talking about some time ago now, actually, and I think that it is happening a lot more than we think. Talking in the order of 30, 40 kilometers. I think we will probably see a lot more of them soon. But
is that mainly using repeater drones or the single drone going 40 kilometers?
Well, I'm not sure, but there has been some official messaging that they are making FPV style drones that have double the range or more than the typical one. And back in the winter, Ukraine said that an FPV drone has maximum 18 kilometers range, or maybe 20. So, if that messaging is true, then we're talking about 40 plus kilometers. Wow. I'm not sure how they achieve it. Is it better batteries? Is it smaller payloads, lighter drones? Not sure, but I think the FPV drone warfare is going to change a lot. Not necessarily. The Ukrainians don't look at it as solely as a one-way munition anymore. They use a lot more what they call dive bombers. So FPV drones that can either crash into a target and explode, or drop the munition and fly back and be reused. So things are developing there.
Someone asked, how easy is it to add harm tech to drones? So anti-radiation, so that they can hunt out things giving a footprint.
That's not something I can say that I know anything about.
Okay, fair cop there. So what else in your experiences out there, Erlend, did you pick up from the people you were talking to, in terms of, you know, how drone warfare is evolving, how people are using them, what are the successes and challenges?
So the people I talk to, they say that they mainly focus on heavy drones that drop munition. But they do also use thousands of FPV drones, which is quite funny. Like they expend thousands of FPV drones, but they still don't focus on that. I think we're going to see a lot more both heavy drones dropping munitions and what they told me and what they do is basically mine the roads. That's their main focus because they have drones that have the capability to drop these TM62 anti-tank mines. And they I gave you some videos that demonstrate that. It's not from
literally, oops, that one has some AC/DC going nicely. So these are heavy drones as well, aren't they? So you know, that's 10 kilograms. Is it is it TM62 mine?
Yeah, 9, I think. Yeah, this video, yeah, that one is
that's
safe.
just a short
safe.
one, but yeah,
that one is safe. But yeah, they basically go out there, drop, you know, 10, 15 dropped TM62 mines on a junction or somewhere they know the Russians are going to cross. They probably recce that area very well beforehand, so they know where they want to drop them for the best effect, and they know that the Russians are using those roads. So what they showed me when I met them was highly successful operations, and they were very, very happy about it. So this seems to be very effective, and hindering enemy logistics is one of the key, one of the main targets any defending army should have.
what
So
do you mean by
it's very
logistics here?
so
in particular?
well. So they were mining roads that were being used to resupply enemy positions. So frontline logistics, basically.
Yeah, and this is something that, yeah, as you say, we are seeing more and more. I'm just going to show you this, not this particularly anything other than it is again dropping another anti-tank mine, and of course these are either tracks or
I wouldn't show more of that video if I were you.
Yeah, it's okay. I'll yeah. So yeah, so that, you know, these are tracks and roads that people are using and then think, well, these are safe, we've mine cleared these, brilliant. And then of course you drop a bunch of mines in the night and you think, right, let's go out and do our normal business today, and then bang, you're gone. And these are having some tremendous effect.
Yep. They told me this is highly effective, and these videos are not from the same unit, but what that tells me again is that the Ukrainians have been very successful in developing doctrine, because if we used to see one unit employ one very successful strategy, and then it took quite a long time before it caught on. But this time, I went there, I discovered this, came back home, talked to Geek and Andrew, and they're like, "Well, hell yeah, we've seen that, but it wasn't from them." So, yeah, there's some really good tactic and doctrine development happening at the Ukrainian side.
And it's obviously happening in, and probably concurrently in different units as they you know, I don't want to get geeky here, but in evolutionary terms it's called convergent evolution, where evolution will end up with the same the process of evolution can give you the same outcome, but actually through multiple different evolutionary pathways. and I guess you're going to have people working on things and coming up with stuff at different places along the front line at the same time, and maybe both sides, and it's just a really chaotic arms race between, you know, cat and mouse game between both sides. Are there any changes, Daniele, that you have noticed of late with regard to the data that you've been looking at?
Regarding which particular aspect, because now it's becoming so huge.
Yeah, well, anything really. Is there any data analysis you've done recently where you're going, oh, that's changing a little bit, or that's a bit different?
Nothing that I currently published, and I mean, I was looking at essentially in the last few months. I was working mainly on the article that then I published, which was the one on the tank, and of course I also continuously help Andrew, and so by looking at the video, what I can say is that I start to see a lot of more different types of ammunition, including a larger use of dive bomber, FPV dive bomber, especially on attacking position, and also I start to see a lot of different type of ammunition in terms of incendiary ammunition, and so if you remember, before this article, I spoke also about in another article about the development of ammunition, and I think this is something that is slowly happening. We start to see EFP charges becoming more and more effective and more distributed along the front line. So I think the classical RPG-7 warhead will be an option, but I think we will see. I mean, you don't see in the video, but we will see from fundraiser or producer starting to introduce more and more effective warhead, in particular against armored vehicle. And here you can see the stats that I generated by analyzing by hand, so one by one, all the T-72 that have been damaged since March 2024. And by observing the area of the strikes, I concluded that most of the strike happened, of course, on the behind, but the most interesting thing was the fact that drone pilot tends to adopt a particular flight path and a flight maneuver when they attack the turret rear hull location, and this because they need to tilt the drone in a particular angle in order to maximize the level of penetration of the warhead. And if done successfully, you can essentially pierce through the very thin armor that is on the top, essentially, of the engine bay, and pierce through the main hull and go directly into the autoloader, causing effectively the complete destruction of the tank by a cooking of the ammunition. And this is very nice. I mean, nice in the sense that you can see how the training of FPV pilot has a very, very big impact on this, because doing this maneuver at very high speed in a fraction of a second is not something that can be done by everyone, or at least can be done possibly by everyone, but only after an intense and serious training. And this is honestly all the times they strike this position, they do. Something similar happen also with the frontal armor, but in the lower part. So this is a very well-known weak point on T-72, but I didn't report in this article. So when necessary, FPV pilot can essentially go in front of the tank and then just below the frontal part in order to pierce on the side of the driver. And most of the time, these type of strikes are very, very successful. And
yeah. By the way, I can say that while I was in Ukraine, I got to hold one of the new explosive form penetrator charges in my hands. It's absolutely massive. Really? And that thing can. They told me that charge can penetrate any known fielded tank in Ukraine. Also, all the allied ones, but yeah, that's not.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Which is what
like,
you'd expect. I mean, that's a natural evolution, right? And they are now making these, rather than just retrofitting a RPG 7 warhead to a drone, they're making bespoke ordnance for drones, which is obviously much more effective.
yeah, and also because they don't need to, be on a rocket, they can reduce a lot of weight from the warhead that they don't need, because they just need it to fly on the drone and perform well as a penetrator.
Yeah.
So you get a lot more bang for each gram, basically.
Yeah.
And that's also something they do a lot with anti-personnel warheads, and I think that's been even more effective than just changing out the RPG warheads with these EFP charges, because the devastation of these anti-personnel warheads is absolutely insane.
I mean, this is going to be quite macabre, but what does an anti-personnel one do? Is it like an airburst where you try and explode above multiple people, or is this designed to inflict the most damage on a single human, or is it to hit low down and just spread out with shrapnel? Or I mean, I
There
don't
are
know.
different types.
Both, all of the things you mentioned, but yeah, for instance, in the Wild Hornets drones, which we speak to them regularly, and we also had them on the stream. They have detonator buttons on all of their FPV drones, so they don't need to actually crash to blow up or drop ammunition. They can fly over someone and blow it. Yeah,
it's funny because you said earlier, the skills these guys have to hit the tanks in the right place and the incredible training, and it's like this is the new esports, isn't it? Like I was watching the England-Slovakia game the other day, and one of my twin boys, he was like, and no offense to anyone who's Slovakian here, like typical like privileged English kid, going like, what are we doing losing to Slovakia? I mean, who are they? And the first thing he said, it's like, who are they? They don't even have esports, particularly good esports. And like, is that the first place you go? Like I would never be like, oh, Slovakia, they're quite a good football team, or they've got a couple of tennis players, or they're all right. It's like the first place he went is, where are they in the esports world? I'm like, Jesus, the time has flown. I've been left behind here. But you can imagine, like in 10 years' time, there'll be computer games, as sad as it is, but there'll be computer games of blowing up tanks.
There are
with
already.
drones. There already.
There is already. Yeah, it's my personal way to go when I'm angry. No, it's there is a very good game on FPV drones on Steam. Has been developed probably and is used also for pilots. The physics is very good. It's a kind of you can introduce delays, artifacts. It's a very, very good one. And
interesting.
I think there are all. Sorry, just one last thing. There are also groups in the U.S. Army and then Australian Army that have very young FPV pilot competing, not only virtual but also with real FPV. So some movement in this direction is there. Sorry, Erlend.
No, I thought you were done. Sorry. I just wanted to answer that question. I know Andrew is working on something with one of the Tochnyi guys for that, and I've also gotten some of the. I haven't been good enough. I've been doing my job good enough because I started to get some of the losses data from Andrew and get our collaborator Chris to fix some nice graphics, but it's one of those things that just I didn't have enough time to focus on, but that's going to happen regularly at some point. But we in Tochnyi and Andrew has a backlog of things we want to do.
Yeah, I know. I'm blown away. Right, first of all, I'm going to take some plaudits here for being a matchmaker. So Chris Jones, who runs Clockwork Design, and he's designed my my merchandise that I'm not wearing at the moment. So if people ever buy merchandise from Redbubble, my t-shirts and whatever, he designed them. He's an absolute legend, and he got together with you guys and is producing. I presume he did that graphical, at least some of a lot of your graphics. So that's really cool. So actually, he's still like doing his thing with you.
Oh yeah, he's an associate at Tochnyi, and he's doing very, very well actually, and has a lot of ideas. We're probably not, been good enough to exploit Chris's passion and skills, but yeah, he is always happy to help and do stuff, and being able to represent data and facts with graphical design is incredibly useful, because most people do not like to look at a spreadsheet and consume data that way.
And do you know what? You put something like that on Twitter and people understand. That is just, you get it. That's great. I mean,
yeah, and you have to see my original, because this is of course done by Chris, and I sent to him like what I've done in PowerPoint, and luckily
Chris did a better job.
Thank you for existing, Chris.
But when Chris joined, I said to Daniele, you have to start using his stuff for your graphics, and Daniele was a little bit bitter because he felt very proud of his graphics. And and to be fair, like it was very effective. You got all the Russians to get pissed off on Telegram, and your especially the colors of your graph, because it was so ugly. Everyone just saw immediately. Oh, that's Daniele's stuff, right?
Hey,
I'm just joking.
Fine. This is a great question from Vigo. Thanks for hanging out, Vigo. Because I saw a video the other day of Black Hornet Nano being used again, and the Ukrainians were given these really early on in the war. Then we didn't hear anything about them, and then they just popped up again. So just to let people know, these are drones that are about that big, and the way you would use them, I imagine, is in an urban environment when you're kind of in a building and you want to see if there's anyone around the corner or up the stairs. You send this mini drone, the size of a sort of large dragonfly type thing, or a bit bigger than that, and then it goes and it checks out the building, and then you can see, right, it's clear or it's not clear. We need to take some people out in that room. Do you know anything about these drones? Do you see much footage of these being used?
So we don't see much footage of it, but I do know that it is being used. So this drone is Norwegian, by the way. So that's kind of cool. I've actually flown one once. I was lucky to get to test it out, but that was a very old version of it. It was back then already very quiet, and I was amazed by what they could do with it. I'm not sure which of the Black Hornet drones which versions they've got. I think we probably these were in a bunch of Western militaries, and I know Norway, the UK, and the US have donated them. I'm not sure if any other has. I would assume that we dumped all the old ones that we never used on them, and then now are procuring the new ones. I know that they've got some of the new ones as well, and they are very expensive. I think they're about $150,000 or something per unit. But they're a niche product. It's not meant for most combatants. But what I've heard is that this thing that was made for QCB, so close quarter combat, not just inside buildings, but also in other environments where you would meet the enemy in pretty close range. They've been no one thought that there would be a trench warfare going on in modern times, but I've heard that this has been very useful in trench warfare. Not seen a lot of images or video of it though.
Yeah, it's interesting because drones have now become so integrated into warfare in Ukraine that they are part of the combined arms maneuvers. Like you're starting to see units storm a trench being communicated from above. I mean, how useful is that to know that there's someone hanging around the corner of a trench? Because it can be seen from above, and then you can communicate that to the people storming it, or you can then do a dive bomb or an FPV on that part of the trench with another drone. And so, you know, it's part and parcel. In 10 years' time, drones will just be an absolutely, you know, staple part of the war diet, if you like. And we've seen that develop in real time. I don't know if you have anything to say to that.
Well,
I think we're already there.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. I've seen. I joke on these, but if I will ever the time, I will also ask CJ to help us. But I think it's time to talk about like a kind of combined arms of drone, because you start to see different type of drone working together in order to accomplish a particular task. That could be destroying a bunker, destroying a particular position or a vehicle. And in particularly on attacking defensive position, drones has been super effective because first of all, they remove the men from the very harsh duty of, for example, storming a heavy machine gun position. It's never a nice and pleasant job for infantry. And even if you try to use artillery, the precision is always up to where you can direct the fire. Then you can use surveillance drone to redirect the fire, or even better, you can use a couple of FPV drone to storm that particular bunker. And if you want to be more effective, you can use a dive bomber as well, with an incendiary weapon, or drop after also CS gas and then storm. So and it's already like that, not because I'm inventing this, because I saw these. Unfortunately, also the Russian do this more using different ammunition with a drone drop, but Ukraine has been using different type of drone at the same time on the same objective quite often. And I think this trend will increase with the time.
Yeah, and I just want to mention that I also had a brief conversation about the different munitions that are being used against personnel. And Andrew has been asking, why on earth are the Russians catching fire all the time? And
Yes,
I asked the
I've
question.
noticed that.
Yeah, I asked the same question. I've always said to Andrew, it's their clothes, and I got that confirmed. So like, yeah, I was kind of happy, but also this is kind of terrifying to think about, that they send all these Russians out in highly flammable uniforms because they're cutting corners. And if you know, synthetic fabric is made of petrol, basically petroleum products. So you need to be very careful and cleanse out and do certain things with the textile to make sure that it's fire retardant, but they don't do that. So they basically dress up their soldiers in a petrol based product which hasn't been elaborated in any way or form to be fire retardant. And the soldiers I talked to, they even showed me a Russian uniform, and I touched it. I immediately washed my hands afterwards and did like twice wash and anti-bac because it was disgusting. But also just the feeling of the fabric was something I've never felt while touching something that is supposed to be worn. So there's something weird going on there.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's about concentrating on the little things, and sometimes the little things tell you a lot. You know, if you're thinking, right, this is the quality of the basics that these Russians are getting, then that tells you that, you know, the Russian army is not in a good place, and it's been underfunded, you know, for an awful long time, and corners have been cut. And if they're doing that with the uniform, they're doing that with no doubt other things, and that scales up to possibly military equipment, mechanized equipment and whatnot. I'm just going to do some thanks. So Jason Cowley, thank you for 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Super kind of you. Stephen Bendal, who I want to speak to, he's in Norway at the moment, but he has been in Ukraine just this last few weeks. It will be good and fair for the legend of the multiverse to receive total immunity. Don't get me started on the immunity thing, Stephen. You know I have been ranting for 2 days now. Kobe Jack gifted a ATP Geopolitics membership. Thank you very much, Kobe. That's very kind. Richard Bennett, always a good supporter of the channel, gifted 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Legend. Kerry Rudd with a super sticker from Australia. Don't make me do my Australian accent again. Jeez. And Finnish guy, member for 4 months, Slava Ukraini, glory to the oat milk too. That is my Ukrainian call sign, oat milk. When I was having tea in Ukraine, I always had to find some oat milk, and I can tell you that was tough. Paul Gilbert gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thank you very much, Paul. Very kind. And Aussie T, legend of the multiverse and omniverse, aka oat milk. So sorry, these are all kind of in jokes and whatnot. JP and ATP team are the best. Slava Ukraini. Thank you very much. The team is the best. And then we get on to, I just want to, you've had this question from Stephen. So thank you, Stephen, again. John Larkin here. Right, this is for Pete and the freedom of Ukraine. Match it or send a penny. Everything counts. And sorry, I hadn't said this earlier, but that is really kind, John. So as all of you know, no doubt by now, Pete Fouché, Pete the medic, died. I met him in Ukraine, and I've done fundraising with him, and we were just getting him 2 of the 4 Medivac Land Rovers, just basically as he sadly died, just before he died. And so that's absolutely, it's an absolute shocker. And that's really affected a lot of us in the community. In fact, he was on the front page of the Metro newspaper today, is in the BBC website. There's an article on him. So that's fantastic that he's getting the recognition. I will put that to Project Constantine, which is his pet thing. I know that Greg Terry, that I do a lot of work with, he's out there at the moment. He's had to identify and he has the role of communicating with Pete's family and sorting out everything there. He's got power of attorney. So Greg's doing a lot of that. And I think he's going to start up a fundraiser for Pete's family. So anyway, thank you very much, John. It's really kind. And John P here says, you're going to kill my bank account. Thank you, John P. You're very, very kind as well. And indeed, Viggo Holmsen matched that. So that's incredibly generous, Viggo, with some Norwegian love there. We've got a lot of Norwegians in house tonight, including Erlend. There must be something about Norway. Maybe it's the fact that it's right next door to a tyrannical empire. In fact, Erlend, what's the situation with Norway and Russia at the moment? Is still things still? Is Norway still a staunch supporter of Ukraine? Have you guys had too much experience of Russia to know any better or any worse?
So an organization that I know some of the founders of, Norwegian Ukrainian Friendship Organization, they regularly pay for polls or opinions surveys to find out what the support for arming Ukraine, and should we send more weapons to Ukraine, should we continue to support, or should we not send weapons to Ukraine? That's basically the 3 questions they ask, or 3 answers that they can give on one of the regular surveys. And the last one I saw, I think the popularity to send more weapons to Ukraine has increased, and I think more than 80% of the Norwegian population thinks that we should send more weapons to Ukraine, something like that, some very, very high number. But our government for some reason, they were very good in the beginning. We promised the largest continuous aid package in Europe very early on.
You were one of the ones as well who did it over a prolonged time period. So to give a message to Putin that we're in this for the long haul.
Yes,
because you're going to do
but
it
then
over a 5-year period.
But then the situation changed, especially because of the lack of the U.S. aid, which has dramatically changed the situation on the battlefield as well. The failed offensive in the summer and a lot of different problems with delayed weapons deliveries, etc., that has caused the need for the aid to go to Ukraine. First of all, a lot more expensive because we cannot deliver from stocks anymore, so we have to buy new things, right? And the pure volume is just the need is higher, and our government, the richest damned country in the world, we don't need to loan any money. We have hundreds of billions of dollars streaming into Norway because of this war, and we won't increase our aid. And I find it absolutely disgraceful. Norway should give at least 10 billion US dollars a year just for weapons, and then a same amount for humanitarian aid, and we wouldn't notice the difference at all.
Is that Alexander Stubb, your prime minister, that is responsible for that? No.
Our prime minister is Jonas Gahr Støre, and yes, he is personally responsible. He is the one that is breaking this together with the what I call the Farmers' Party. They are not very willing to help Ukraine unless they get more money for their farmers. That's a long other story here, but they don't seem to be interested at all. I've tried to engage with politicians from the Central Party, as they're called, and they don't seem interested. People from the Labour Party are interested, and they want to increase the aid, but the Prime Minister seems to not want to. I don't know. He's just not proactive. He's always lagging behind in all the decisions and it's ridiculous. In the beginning, it was good. Norway was one of the first countries that pledged and gave artillery systems to Ukraine very early on. We also gave MLRS to the same system that the UK gave in collaboration with the UK.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
yeah, I remember that.
So we were really good in the beginning, but now it's really bad. Like we're giving less aid than Denmark and Sweden, and we have a way larger GDP.
Yeah, because you've got the sovereign wealth fund as well, which is obviously going to help out. I presume, possibly in some way. John Larkin here again. We were using electronic warfare in the early 90s against the IRA in Northern Ireland. Bloody hell. So yeah, electronic warfare. I wonder if there is, it's obviously come a long way since then, but then maybe in some ways it hasn't come an awful long way. It's still the same kind of thing. Thank you, John. John Larkin then adds, we in the RAF have done triangulation since World War II. The context is a flight speed. So this was going back to a conversation we had earlier, so about triangulation there. So John, I didn't know you were in the RAF, John, so you learn something new every day. Aussie T, thank you very much for your Aussie super sticker. And Stephen Bendal from giving us some more Norwegian love, or in this case, Pete's. May the memories live forever. Indeed. Thank you for that kindly, Stephen, and I will pass that on. So JR has asked, and I don't know if you know this, how far are we away from autonomous beamforming mesh network drones? That's a number of words rammed together that give me no clue about anything.
Far.
Yeah, I think so. If at least if you want them to be as effective as the best pilots and the best FPV drones combined.
What does this mean, though? What is autonomous beamforming mesh network drones?
So just to give some understanding, so the main concept.
I've got a mesh network at home. Is that where we're starting from?
Yeah. Okay. So beamforming, probably the Jeroen, essentially, the fact is that each drone, so swarm formations. So there are a lot of different things to need to be unpacked here. So first of all, you need to be sure that you are able to control the drone in an autonomous way, which doesn't mean that the drone has any AI or things. It's just a cruise missile. Yeah, he knows that I have to go in a certain point. It will find the path by knowing where it is and knowing all his inertial parameter, velocity, speed, pitch, yaw, etc. So once you realize this, and we still have to do this, then you can start to have this drone to communicate with the other drones, and then allow these drones to together do a formation or change this formation depending on the different threat. For example, one concept that we are currently developing in terms of aerial drone is the loyal wingman. So in terms of a supersonic drone that can follow like F-35 or other type of aircraft manned, which is capable of identifying, for example, a threat and sacrifice itself or assist in a strike. So all these things are currently under developing for other applications, which are not these small-scale drones, which are a very good platform to test these algorithms that are behind the behavior. Now, doing this is very, very complex because you need to pack your drones with sensor and communication system. And sensor communication system require power, and power require batteries, which need to be larger than mass. So, and more mass you put on this drone, the less warhead you can put. So it's always a compromise. So at the moment,
this is the same with missiles, with hypersonic missiles. The quicker you want, the faster you want the thing to go, smaller your warhead is. So the Kinjiao, whoop-de-doo, you can get through, uninterdicted, but you've got a smaller warhead. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries. And in particular, I always the Kinzhal is just, and I underline this, a Iskander air-launched. Has nothing to do with a real hypersonic weapon. It's not an hypersonic missile, and it's ballistical. So if it's ballistical, you can intercept it. The only thing that you need is a very good missile and a good radar system that is enabled, and a good computer to figure out how to shoot it down quickly, because otherwise it's a normal missile. So returning on the drone, it's very unlikely that we will see these now, unless the war hopefully will not stand another 5-6 years, because there are other priorities that need to be accomplished, like warhead, make these type of drone, or the FPV, more resistant and resilient to EW. One thing that probably we will see at some point is homing, autonomous homing, which doesn't have anything to do with artificial intelligence and other very buzzy word. So it's just being able to allow the drone to see the target and keep the target in a certain crosshair, and so being able to modify its trajectory in order to hit that target. And that is much more important and much more a bigger leap forward, because at the end of the strike, most of the time the pilot do not have live and video feed, because the line of sight of the drone is broken by other feature like a tree. So even without EW. So solving this problem will increase drastically the capabilities of this weapon without putting too much stuff into the pot. Sorry for this lengthy.
No, it's really, really interesting, and I guess as we meander our way to the end here, and that is kind of gives you a hint of what you may answer. I was going to talk about where do you think we're going, but that kind of gives an answer to at least part of that. Just to track back to asymmetries there and where we're at. What are you most happy about with regard to how things are going, particularly in terms of drone warfare, and what are you most concerned about going forward for Ukraine?
Should I go first?
Yeah, go for it, Erlend.
Well, I think what I'm most happy about is probably the effectiveness of training and doctrine being written and employed on the battlefield. You could also say that the Ukrainians are also very successful on building and manufacturing high quality drones, but I think actually the tactics is equal or more important than the
That's
quality.
interesting. So you're talking about, you said training and doctrine that's being written and applied. So is there a formalization of how Ukraine is using their drones? Are we, you know, is there a doctrinal application?
Yeah. I think that's fairly obvious from watching from a distance. The Ukrainians announced that they would have a drone branch in the military, which is not something you'll see every day. It's something you see every century or so, that a new branch is happening in the army, right? The last time it happened in a major military was probably the U.S. Space Force, but that wasn't really new. This is new. This didn't exist before. It's going to be something, you know, for the next 100 years. They're going to have the drone branch. This is very, very substantial and very impactful that they established a branch. A branch means that there needs to be someone that has doctrinal ownership. That means there's a general that signs the papers that are being written on how to employ the tactics. That this is really, really important.
Yeah, there's a reflection of how important drones are, and we know that. I mean, goodness me, most of the footage we now see concerns drones in some way. I mean, either just by being able to see stuff, you know, just any video footage is essentially taken by a drone.
Yeah, there's some body cameras as well, but yeah, mostly yes.
Yeah, and that's how important drones are. What about your concerns, Erlend?
When it comes to drones, I'm concerned that we in the West don't take drone warfare and counter UAS seriously enough. That we don't learn from the Ukrainian experience so that we can develop better systems or adapt already existing systems to counter UAS defense. And this is already happening too slow. There are some good companies doing good stuff out there for it, but we've been really, really slow on this in the West, and this is a field where Ukraine needs help. They don't have the industrial capacity to plug all the holes that they have in this area of defense.
Thank you for that. And Daniele, what are you most pleased with regard to how Ukraine are utilizing drones, or where it's going, and what are your concerns?
Okay, so I think it's very good to see that every time Ukraine has an issue, and this happens essentially in everything, but they have very, very good to learn and adapt. They do a lot of mistakes but I'm always feel very difficult. I feel always very difficult to judge, because I mean, I'm not the one in a trench or directly involved into the war, so it's always very difficult to understand when something wrong happened, when is something related to wrongdoing, and something to just something can go wrong. So in general, I'm very happy that they will be able to catch up. For example, night vision drone, they have been still dominating on the strike on vehicle, and I think this reflect also the change in command with Sirski, that is trying all his best to don't commit too much effort in pointless defenses, so he preferred to lose territory but attire as much as possible, and I think this is the winning strategy.
Is it
Because
interesting? Is that because he was known to be a bit of a sort of butcher, that kind of idea? You actually think that he is now ceding territory more easily, as long as it sort of costs the Russians, but doesn't cost the Ukrainians? So you think that he is not what people were, or at least not
I
now,
think
what people are saying?
this is my personal opinion, can be wrong. It's my gut feeling that when you look at these rumors, and I mean everyone, even in our private chat, we always discuss about these things. I always say, I don't like when these rumors are so easily spread, because you don't have a counter balance on that. You have just you always see part of the story. So it's and also when a general, I mean, when someone become general, it's not like a king, has a series of people around him, or if the entire system is wrong, and then this very bad, or even if he's not exceptional, there are a lot of there is all the staff around him that works for him. And probably the staff around him is even more important, because I have to inform him, filter the news that comes to you, filter the information, update him. So my personal feeling is that the entire system is working in a different way. Maybe it's just the situation. It's just recognizing that that previous strategy was not going to work, and then they changed. Which is still very good, because this means that if he was the butcher that they said, now is completely opposite. So this means that it's capable of changing, and it's not very much simple at those level, because I mean, ego is always close. So that's the good thing. And the bad things, I think, is the fact that I share the same of Erlend. Honestly, I don't think there is any issue in. No, I mean, there is one thing that I really scared: the capabilities of Russian ISR. I mean, yesterday MiG-29, today Mi-24. These strikes are not going to change anything, but can be very, very damaging to the morale, but also to some particular key infrastructure like airports and airfields and the fighter jet. They have so few, and losing even a couple is a nightmare. So the fact that they have these capabilities scares me, because it's something is one of the few things that at the moment I know that Ukraine has done even better. I mean, they attacked Russia up to 1,000 kilometers, so Russia is much more in trouble with that. But they do this with ballistic missile, which have a much higher yield. So this is quite scary.
Yeah, those medium range reconnaissance drones are a pain in the bloody arse, and I've long been saying on the channel that is one of Ukraine's biggest vulnerabilities. There, especially when you're well, it's not quite the same as the energy infrastructure, which is equally a massive vulnerability. Thank you, guys. Look, Erlend, you went to Ukraine. You've just been there, just come back. Can you give us a sense of the Ukraine that you experienced? Can you give us an insight into the people, to the degree that you understood them and experienced them, and tell us a little bit about that cultural side and that psychological, personal side of visiting Ukraine?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking me about that, because it's really important for me to say that I absolutely enjoyed all my time in Ukraine. Of course, you see that it's a country at war immediately when you come into Ukraine. That something changes in the way people behave a little bit differently, especially when curfew is close. Everyone is a little bit stressed going back home, right? Before midnight. That's a constant reminder of the war, and then of course there's air raid alarms, etc. But I met fantastic people, and I think that Ukraine is a very beautiful country. I absolutely love the landscape. I was very lucky to drive through vast parts of Ukraine in just a couple of days, and then take the train back, and I loved it.
Yeah, it
Yep.
is great, and it's somewhere I am keen to go back. I'm planning on having my second visit there, and who knows, Jeroen, who JR is in the background fielding the questions people have been submitting, and there are a whole bunch I haven't been able to get to, so I'm really sorry. And in fact, JR's had a number of questions I hadn't asked either, so sorry about that, JR. But it'd be wonderful if we can get together and have a few Ukrainian beers together, whilst helping out Ukraine as much as we can.
There's also really good Ukrainian wine, by the way, and I was very lucky to taste something that a few Ukrainians said is the best Ukrainian wine. What was it called again? It was Colonist Chardonnay and Merlot Sauvignon in blend. It was absolutely amazing.
That's interesting because Georgia is the country, which is very close to Ukraine, has the earliest known wine. And then Ukraine also has cognac. When I was there, that was a big thing. You'd have your borscht, and then you'd be slamming back some cognacs, and that was an experience. What else do I want to say? I just wanted to say a few things. Thank you. I don't know if he's still here, Mark from the Little Whiskey Shop. I went and gave a talk in and near Andover. He says evening all from sunny Andover. Mark and another Mark organised me to go and give a talk on Ukraine, and some of you in the live chat actually came a long way to that, and I really, really appreciated that. And it was fantastic to see you there. And Mark is a bit of a legend. If you ever want to buy whiskey or gin, I've just bought 2 bottles of gin as presents from the Little Whiskey Shop in Stockbridge. So if you're in the UK, as some of you are, check out the Little Whiskey Shop in Stockbridge, and also check out Chris at Clockwork Design as well, because he's a total legend that's been helping us all out. And this just made me chuckle. Wizard of Ooze. I just want to sleep if it's hot. Only JP gets me going in the morning with coffee, of course. Maybe you can tell my missus that. She'll be happy to know. Anyway, look, is there anything else on that note that you wanted to add?
Yes.
That you felt that we haven't talked about?
We could probably talk all night. But one thing is, Daniele is doing continuing the fundraiser.
And asked about this, yes.
And it's there's some people who donated, but it's going a little bit slow, and I'm very sad for that. So if you can't donate, at least maybe help to promote and retweet Daniele's fundraiser, because it's going to something really important. These EW guys, they're not getting as much attention as they deserve, also because they can't show a lot of what they're doing. So Daniele.
No, not even the unit. I'm so sorry that I cannot share the unit entirely, because their work is very sensitive, and they cannot share their face or what they do. And honestly, most of the work that they do is going around with trucks, SUV, mostly modified, and the one that is inside the picture here is modified in a very clever way, because during night they cannot use lights, because they need to most of the time bring EW system or other system to listen to communication of the Russian very close to the front line. So they have to go without lights, so they use the cameras. So they have completely removed the lights just in case for mistake they turn on, and they have ear camera and cameras or ear lights. This is one of the latest that we bought. This is one of the most powerful. Is against FPV. The other one that is shown in the previous one is always against FPV, but it's smaller. And we are in the process of buying a third one. A fourth one is already bought by the community of Lviv, and so there is a lot ongoing. So any help will be very much appreciated, because these guys really do an invisible job for
help them buy more Lego. Help them buy more Lego. That's what, yeah. So if anyone can help out with that, that would be absolutely fantastic. Be really appreciated. And Daniela, always like hit me up if you need me to retweet stuff and shout about it as well. And
Thank you.
And if you want to come on and talk about that, but yeah, that's a great thing to say, Erlend, to point us toward his fundraising there. Anything else at all that you think we haven't covered? I know there's lots more. There's so much more.
Well, I'm definitely going back, and I hope Daniele will be with me the next time. And I also hope I will have more time there, although it's difficult, it's quite far to drive from Norway and get back, but it's worth it.
Yeah. I mean, when I was there for 10 days, I think. Which, is a couple of days is traveling. When you go to, you don't obviously fly into Kyiv, so you have to get to Poland and then out to Helm and then get the train into Kyiv, and that of course takes, both ways takes an awful lot of time. But I found that I didn't get to see like Kyiv too much, and that's something I'd like to go back and experience more. But also, remembering that this is a place at war, and it's kind of like you don't want to be a war tourist. But also you feel that, I'd rather go and spend my time putting money, like literally, spend my time putting money there than another country. So, do you know what I mean? John Larkin says, I don't know if that's it to go towards Daniela's one, but he says match it, Cockwombles, which is John Larkin's favorite turn of phrase. It is one of mine as well. He's been incredibly generous tonight. Thank you, John. You are such a marvelous human being and supporter of this here channel and the causes that we also support together. So yeah, no, it will be, it's one of those things. We're in this weird community of people concerned with this war, and we form these communities and then feel, it's all about Ukraine. Everything is about Ukraine for me. So, and I guess that's kind of the same for you guys as well. But yes, it's an unhealthy obsession, no doubt. Well, look, thank you to both of you. I really appreciate the time you have spent with us and with the community. Anyone who has, there you go. He's here we have AJ Simo. He's matched it, but he's not a Cockwomble. So thank you, AJ Simo. That's great. Good to have you on board. Thank you guys for being here. And just to let people know that you can find them at both Tochnyi on Twitter and Tochnyi on Tinternet in general, tochnyi.info. And also Daniela is Hearttree Fock there, and Erlend is I forget now. It's I don't know. I've lost you, Erlend. There you are. You're Dropning on Twitter. So please go and find these guys and give them a follow and help them out. Thanks so much, guys. I'd love to have you back on at some time in the future. But in the meantime, big love to you.
See you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Jonathan.
No problem at all. Look, you hang out there. In the meantime, guys, everyone take care of yourselves. Big love, and I'll speak to you all tomorrow. Oh, and Rob just squeezes one in there. Thank you, Rob. That's really generous of you. Take care, buddy. And yeah, I will, as I said, speak to you all tomorrow.